Bureau Report, India Today.
So is the government really clamping down on social media websites, or is it clamping down on fake news? Is the government selective in its crackdown? Joining me on the political face-off, Gaurav Bhatia, the BJP spokesperson, Pawan, Khera, the Congress's spokesperson. To you, Mr. Bhatia, first, is this a crackdown on fake news or a clampdown on Twitter? What happened in Ghaziabad is one of numerous instances of similar fake news about hate speech being put out, or wrong images being put out. But I want to understand from you, Mr. Bhatia, how do you see the government's action? Is it a clampdown or a crackdown?
So, Rajdeep, there are two aspects to it. First of all, the incident itself, and freedom of speech is very vital. But at the same time, it is not absolute. You cannot incite violence. And for a journalist, you call them so-called journalists, they have a duty also to check the facts. I have in my hand a very clear press release from Ghaziabad police. And what did it say? It clearly mentioned that this is not a communal crime. Rather, it is a crime between certain individuals.
Sir, can I just stop you for a moment, because I want you to answer. Sir, just a minute. This was subsequently what you're saying. The Ghaziabad police says it was not a communal crime. But originally, every newspaper in the country website reported it. That was the original report. But the police has cracked down on selective individuals and selective sites. That's the concern at the moment, that these new laws which lift the legal shield will be used selectively to crack down against those who are seen to be anti-government. Your response?
Rajdeep, I hope I'll not be interrupted, because it is not fair on your part.
Go ahead. I just wanted to give
change
context.
the goalpost. Okay, now don't interrupt me for 2 minutes. And I think I'll make my point very clearly. Yeah. So let me tell you, I was pointing out, this was even prior to any of the newspapers reported this crime. And what was essentially said, the Ghaziabad police made it very clear that the attackers or the accused persons belong to the Hindu as well as the Muslim community. Those who have been arrested also belong to both the communities. And there is no communal tinge to it. But leaders like Rahul Gandhi, they come out, they invoke Jai Shri Ram ka nara, Prabhu Ram ye nahi sikhate, all that, making it communal. Asaduddin Owaisi goes a step further to say that this is Hindutva Gundagardi. Would he have the courage to say Islamic Gundagardi? Second point, I have in my hand the original complaint given by the victim. Nowhere does it mention that he was forced to chant Jai Shri Ram 1, and 2, that he was forced to shave off his beard. But I am not getting into it. All that I am saying is there are improvements. The investigation is going on. But let me say one thing very clearly. The media has a very onerous responsibility of reporting after doing a fact check. I know of your tweet and your statement when on 26 Jan, farmers were protesting and they reached the Red Fort. And you said, and I am quoting from your tweet, one person, 45-year-old Navneet, killed allegedly in police firing at ITO. Farmers tell me the sacrifice will not go in vain. Now, Rajdeep, I will only ask you, this tweet of yours is inflammatory, is inciting people, and it could lead to losing precious human lives.
Mr.
So
Gaurav
would you
Bhatia,
say this?
Mr.
Please,
Gaurav Bhatia,
Rajdeep, don't interrupt me.
No. You see, sir, you have made your point. You are claiming that those tweets are inciting.
No, I'm asking you something.
I have used the word.
Ask you a question?
Sir, that matter is already in the court. I am happy to answer any question. I use the word allegedly. My point is, and this is precisely, a reporter in a live situation is reporting an evolving situation.
So you should check your facts.
So are you telling me that all those who are pro-government, who have been spreading hatred for the last several years, no government has ever acted against them or the police? You will act in this one case because it suits you.
My right to ask you a question.
No, sir. This is not.
Allow me.
Sir, I am the anchor. Let Pawan Khera listening to you.
Yes.
Pawan Khera, here is Gaurav Bhatia saying, look, if there is any whiff of a fake item, inflammatory, which can incite, like he claims the Ghaziabad story was, where allegedly the person was attacked because he was not chanting Jai Shri Ram, the police says that's not the case. Should those be arrested? And therefore, Twitter doesn't have the legal shield, nor do those individuals have anymore, is what Gaurav Bhatia says. Free speech has its limits.
Rajdeep, I'll give you two examples. One, my own tweet.
I can't mention about that tweet because now it's sub judice. This government asked Twitter to pull it down because it went against this government. Twitter didn't even ask me, didn't bother to ask me. They just informed me by a mail that the government of India wants this tweet to be pulled down. I've dragged Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad and Twitter to the court. Let the courts decide. Now I compare this example with the example of what the BJP did, forged our letterhead, created fake content. Did the government of India act against those in the BJP who faked that content on our letterhead? No. What did Twitter do on Sambit Patra's tweet? They said manipulated content. Look at the double standards of the government. The government decides that Pawan Khera's tweet has to be pulled down. The government decides that the act of faking content on a forged letterhead of the Congress done by the BJP, nothing has to be done about it. Can you trust a government which shamelessly follows these double standards?
So what is your concern now that the legal shield has been lifted?
That's what in fact, I just said it, I'll repeat it. My concern is we cannot trust this government with being fair. For them, everything is dissent. Everything that a word you utter against Mr. Narendra Modi and his government, whether it's the farmers, whether it's the students, whether it's the opposition, whether it's the media. I mean, I won't even give you the example of Gauri Lankesh, from a journalist getting killed because she very vehemently spoke out against a particular ideology, to journalists losing their jobs. Either you lose your life or you lose your job. You definitely lose your freedom to write. You definitely lose your freedom to dissent. You definitely lose your freedom to criticize this government.
So you believe that these new laws will mean that anyone who criticizes this government is now vulnerable? You're claiming that this law can be easily misused. You're saying yes.
What I'm saying is let the courts decide. Let the government not decide. If the courts decide that Pawan Khera's tweet has to go, I'm happy. Who is the government to decide that?
You know that
because the same government tolerates tweets by Kapil Mishra, the same government tolerates tweets by all kinds of hate mongers in the BJP and the right wing. What has the government done with those tweets?
I'm
not even asking you what
let Gaurav Bhatia respond. Gaurav Bhatia, the fear is that the hate mongers will get away. You're using this one instance in Ghaziabad to try and target those who are anti-government. As I said, all mainstream media also carried it. There's no FIR against them. It's very selectively done, and that's the fear. This new law or the freedom that the government or police now has will be used selectively to target individuals or organizations who are perceived as anti-government. You're not trusted to defend free speech. When your own party is when people close to you are hate mongers, you won't act against them, will you?
Rajdeep, I have a request. I'll first respond to Pawan Bhai and then I will ask you a question and take the discussion forward in relation to Twitter. Now look at the hypocrisy. He gave 2 examples. I'll also give 2 examples. He says, let the court decide. So how did Twitter decide that Sambit Patra's tweet was manipulative? And Chhattisgarh police registered a case against Raman Singh ji, former Chief Minister, and Sambit Patra. And do you know what the court has decided? They've stayed their arrest and the proceedings. That's what the court has done.
That's one. Second,
you are a journalist. I want to ask you, Rajdeep, tell me, Arnab Goswami, I know he's one of your colleagues, but I ask you, what about his freedom of speech and expression and the right to report? Are you with him or not? I'm asking you.
I am fully with all journalists, including Mr. Goswami. No, 1 minute, sir. But I am with all. The problem with, sir, the problem is just a minute, sir. The problem is I stand up for Arnab Goswami and I will stand up for a journalist who is seen to be anti-government, who exposes the government and has an FIR and sedition charges filed against them. Are you going to stand up against both? You tell me. You stand up against both.
I'm not done. Rajdeep.
I stand up for both. I stand up for any misuse of state power, sir. Any misuse of state power.
So,
I'm being clear.
Rajdeep, let me make my point, and I am.
No, I am asking you now. Will you stand up for the journalists who have exposed misuse in Uttar Pradesh and have FIRs filed against them or sedition charges against them? Will you stand against them, for them? Tell me, please.
I will. Rajdeep, now I hope I'll get some.
No, answer it.
I am answering.
Sir.
I am answering. I am brave enough, just like you. I know the questions that you posed to Sonia Gandhi, Rahul Gandhi so bravely. I will also answer.
Sir, sir.
Please listen.
Again, you're
Rajdeep,
making it
you have to
personal.
waste time on this
Reduce this
rhetoric.
debate.
I am willing to show all my
I-
interviews in the public domain. I have nothing to hide. I am not a politician who hides things.
So let me know when I have to speak.
I asked you a question. Will
I
you
am
stand up for
responding to that.
journalists who speak out against the government?
So can I respond now?
Yes, please.
So Rajdeep, I commend you first of all admitting that Maharashtra government was vindictive. There was vendetta against Arnab Goswami, and that is how they curb the right to freedom of speech. I will answer your question
For
very
Arnab
categorically.
Goswami, there are hundreds of anonymous journalists who are being
respond?
targeted in this country, Mr. Gaurav Bhatia, that you are clueless
Why
about.
are you getting agitated?
No, because you are
I'm answering
clueless.
your question.
I'm asking you
I'm
this.
answering your question.
Will you stand up for other journalists?
If you listen to me, you don't want to listen
No,
to
I'm
me.
asking you a question, dear.
I am answering the question, dear.
Please.
सुनिए तो मेरी बात.
Boliye.
हाँ. Any journalist who's targeted by the government, whichever government it might be, if a court says that he is being wrongly targeted, I will respect it.
Okay.
I say that with utmost responsibility. But now let me make my point for Twitter.
Very quickly.
Twitter is a company. It is not above the law of the country and the constitution.
Agreed.
There were rules.
Agreed.
They got enough time. They did not implement that. Why did they not comply with the rules? And third, is it not important that Twitter should have verified the facts? Either they are an intermediary and they don't judge any tweet, or they start judging and then start accepting responsibility for judging these tweets which are on their platform.
Okay.
And last but not the least, if Kangana Ranaut's account can be suspended, why have they not suspended the accounts of Sabah Naqvi and this Rana Ayub?
Sir, have you seen some of the comments that Kangana Ranaut has made? Have you seen what she says? Anyway, Pawan Khera respond. The fact is, what is sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. Is this about Twitter, or is this about your belief that there is selectivity in the way things are done? Let's end it there.
First of all, when you call Congress, let this not be a debate between you and the BJP. Let us also get our fair chance.
Fair
please.
enough.
For every Arnab Goswami who was caught red-handed peddling influence, celebrating the deaths of our brave hearts, there is a Supriya Sharma who was exposing the pitiable conditions of a village in Domri. There was an FIR lodged against her by the UP government. There is a Pawan Jaiswal who did the Namak Roti story. There was an FIR done against him by the UP government. There was a Manish Pandey who was a News One journalist. STF picked him up. Why? Because he spoke about the bad condition of the PPE, quality of the PPE. There was an Amitabh Rawat, all UP. Now, this is a party which does victim shaming in Kathua and Unnao. Do you entrust them with my freedom of speech? Do you entrust them with democracy? For God's sake, look at what the Delhi High Court said yesterday. It came cracking down on the BJP.
So it's a lack of
Such
trust.
an anxious government.
No, can I respond
So it's the
to that,
trust
Rajdeep?
deficit. No, I'm afraid it is a question of a trust deficit that exists. That is the question I think that needs to be addressed. If the government can address the trust deficit question, I think people will respect what the government does. The proof of the pudding will lie in the eating. We will wait and see whether the government will act against those who have spread hate over the last few years and whether those are also acted against. Gaurav Bhatia, Pawan Khera, as always a pleasure talking to two fine spokespersons of their parties. Let's take a break. When we return, we have a bit of a special at the very end of the show today. Galwan Ke Veer. We'll be joined by Bikram Ghosh and Hariharan. They'll pay a musical tribute to our brave soldiers on the other side. You're watching the news today.